anything that you win, any small victory that you have is going to help somebody else. And that's what we want. We want to build this movement where everybody's struggles are separate, but we're all recognized that we all have something in common, that we're all fighting for the same thing.
You like to tell us a little bit about your victories, like the main victories you have achieved so far?
One of the big legal precedents that we set was with two women who were sex workers who came to the Women's Centre through the English Collective of Prostitutes in the early 90s, and they had both been raped by the same client, and one of them had gone to the police and was basically brushed off, saying that you wouldn't be believed. You're telling me you're a prostitute, no one would believe you. But when she heard a second woman had been attacked by the same man, she went back and insisted on making a statement. And we together with the legal service at the Women's Centre called Legal Action for Women, we discussed what could happen in their case, because it's very hard to get a case reopened once it's been closed by the Crown Prosecution Service. We found some lawyers who would do the case without being paid privately in what's called a private prosecution. And it took 3 years to get it to court, and eventually, after a lot of work put in by us and them, it went to court, had a full trial, and the man was convicted. And I think he was given 16 years originally and went to 11 on appeal. But still, that was a very substantial sentence at that time. 1995 was the court case, and it set a legal precedent because it was the first private prosecution for rape in England and Wales. And at the same time, we published a dossier of 15 cases that the Crown Prosecution Service should have prosecuted, and almost everyone was given the same excuse, which was insufficient evidence. But in many of the cases, the women were from, poorer sections of the community, and basically we felt that it was largely sexism, racism, and other prejudices that were hidden behind this catch-all, there's not enough evidence. So that was a good one to win.
Yeah, absolutely. It's especially when you create a precedent, it does change things for the foreseeable future, at least.
When I first came to the centre with my own case, I felt really demoralised, very pessimistic. I felt like if I didn't get justice, then what was the point? It was probably a very, very lowest point of my life, probably. But what the centre taught me, not just Lisa and the others in W.A.R, but all the other groups, really stressed to me the importance of, when you feel like this and you feel really demoralised and stressed and depressed, just remember that every little victory that you have is so important, because you're building a movement against rape and against injustice and against violence. And you have to look at your victory, however small it is, and how is that going to help the next person in their struggle, whether it's for asylum, whether it's, somebody that's a sex worker, whether it's somebody with a disability. Anything that you win, any small victory that you have is going to help somebody else. And that's what we want. We want to build this movement where everybody's struggles are separate, but we're all recognized that we all have something in common, that we're all fighting for the same thing. And when you get a victory, even if it's not the goal, even if it's not what you want there and then, you feel so uplifted to know that you've helped somebody, and somebody's won part of their case that is really going to make a difference for others. And I think that's what the centre has taught me, is, you're not going to get from where you want to be from here to there in a day. It's going to take years of struggle, but we're all doing something, that's going to help other people. And it is wonderful when you see people that have that have come and they feel hopeless, and then you see a transformation before your eyes of somebody that gets stronger, that does pick themselves up off the floor and think, yes, I can carry on, even if I haven't got the justice that I want. I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to pass the baton on to somebody else so that they know what to do and they know what their rights are. And I think that's really important when you feel low, is just to remember, you know, just every little victory is so important for the next person.
Well, I think I mentioned, you know, the All African Women's Group, you know, who we work very closely with. And a lot of women in that group have the experience, particularly during the COVID period, but also, you know, well before, that their immigration status kind of depends on staying with an abusive man. And the men know that they can report to the authorities. So she's in this situation where, you know, at any time she could be, you know, they could come for her, if you like. And it's you know, it's another form of coercive and controlling that we've heard that rape survivors and particularly women with children, you know, face all the time. In her case, she's a Black woman and he's white, and he's extremely racist. And sort of during the COVID period, she became his carer and his health deteriorated. So whenever they have a row, he tells her, you can leave at any time, knowing full well that she would leave, you know, immediately, but she's got nowhere to go. So her life is like, as she describes it, she's like walking on eggshells. She never knows when things are going to explode. And her dependence on him and her poverty is manufactured by the apartheid benefit system, because anybody else, you know, might be able to leave and at least get a benefit to survive on. But she's in that situation where, as I think I mentioned before, asylum seekers get no more than £39 a week, and therefore, you know, how can you survive? But in her case, she wasn't even getting that. So she had no independent income until, you know, in Women Against Rape, we helped her to apply for money which you're allowed to get while you're making an asylum claim. But of course, oftentimes they put the pressure on anybody who applies for that to accept to be rehoused. And that rehousing will almost certainly be outside of London, away from us, her, you know, her close support network. She's somebody who was in detention. So when she got out, she was extremely dependent on us. But the reason it's a victory was that after a battle, we got her the small weekly sum. But, and small as it is, it's a piece of independence until she wins her status. And it's also something that she can use to contribute and show this guy, look, you know, I'm not worthless. I don't have to be entirely and totally dependent on you for every bit of food I get. Say one example, which I think is really encompasses everything. A young girl who was fundamentally an underage mum, who's a rape survivor from Uganda, literally raped at the age of 12 and 13, who made it to England, but wasn't able to get her status sorted out. She had two children here in the UK, and she ran away because she was terrified that the authorities were going to take her children off her. And in doing that, they found her, they took her children off her, and they put her in detention. And it took the women inside that detention center to battle and call, you know, to find us, call us. We mounted a massive campaign, and we eventually got her released and her reunited with the children, but not without an enormous amount of damage being done to her and her two babies. But she was a success story as well, because we managed to get compensation for her. Now, it's very hidden how many asylum seekers get compensation, but a lot do. They get compensation for the unlawful detention, and they get compensation, as in her case, for the you know, for what actually happened, having her child, certainly, and one that she was breastfeeding, taken away from her. You know, so a lot can be done. when we can galvanize public opinion and public support, which is way easier to do when people hear directly from women themselves, rather from NGOs, who might be sort of ready to put round a bucket and say, make a donation here, there, and everywhere. Yeah, that's a very different level of understanding and I hate the word empowerment, but it is that women themselves have come with those skills and that ability to organize. And what they need is what we all need, which is the resources and the money to go for the justice that we know we're entitled to. So it's victories like that which give hope to other women in the group who may be in similar situations, who don't feel they can leave either, or who don't feel they can even make a fight. So hearing that, doing the fighting together, and if, like she is, the women themselves stay central to that fight and don't allow themselves to go down the route of being bullied by the Home Office, because that's what the Home Office is very keen on, that bullying women into giving up their asylum claims, into giving up totally and going back through a process they call voluntary returns. There's no voluntary and it's no choice if you forced with being sent back to all the violence that you fled. So these are things that can help, exactly as Nicola said, to give other women the real chance and the real feeling that it's not inevitable that you have to succumb to the kind of repression and the hostile environment that's coming down on asylum seekers, which, as you've probably seen, is going to increase with Priti Patel's nationality and border bill that she's bringing in. But there's much resistance to it, and we expect that to grow when the public and when people realize exactly, who asylum seekers are and why they're in these lands.
The fact that they call it voluntary return, it's part of these marketing tactics that they use to sell these things to the broader population, so they keep them in this sleepy status, thinking, oh, voluntary, oh, that's cool, so they're willing to go. Yeah, why not? Why don't they go back? Why don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And they say things like, somebody who's ready to accept voluntary returns will get £2,000, little knowing that they take the price of the ticket to fly back. Guess what it costs? 2,000 plus. All of this stuff is really a raft of, horrendous and very, very brutal. And what's that word where I know it's propaganda, but it's also this insidiousness of constantly belittling, berating, bullying, and making other people feel that the real scandal and problem are all these asylum seekers that are coming, all these refugees that are coming across the Medon and across the Channel in small boats. And who wouldn't do that if you felt, if your life was going to be ended in the country you're in? There isn't anybody who wouldn't do that. You save your children, yourself. That's what you fight for. So to present us, those of us who are of colour, coming in that way is also undermining of those of us who've got papers and don't have that problem, and of white people who don't have the problem anyway, who, resident here. It's to really pit us against each other for these exceedingly small resources and then tell us we're not entitled to them anyway.
Yeah, first they start the resources, whereas there's plenty of money and resources, but they just go to the 1% at the top, who have 3 Bentleys or Ferraris in their garage across I don't know how many penthouses. That's the real problem. But indeed, it's easier to turn people against each other based on like superficial differences. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, the 0-hour contract is a brilliant proof of I mean how much these elites care little for everybody, even for whites, even for white men. At the end of the day, they will come come for you as well. So that's why people, yeah, should absolutely unite before it's too late. And yeah, there was something else you mentioned, Chrissy, which is this policy of numbers and targets. Like they need to reach targets. That's why they try to discourage all these women from asking from demanding asylum, right? It's because they have yearly targets, I'm guessing, but this is what happens elsewhere in France, for example. Do you confirm that they have at the Home Office these targets, like yearly targets of how many asylum seekers we're going to have, like this year and next year, and the budget for that?
Well, I don't know the details of that. I'm sure they do, and I'm sure, you know, one of the issues is to get people who are working in those jobs to speak out. And there was a case of a whistleblower, you know, some years ago. She decided to become, because she knew something about asylum claims, so she decided to work in the Home Office decision-making policy office to see what was going on. And she revealed, I think it was to the Home Affairs Select Committee or somebody, she was interviewed by them because she'd spoken out about being in an office where you felt if you made a positive decision on somebody's asylum case, you know, you were going to be completely ostracized by everybody else. And what she experienced was, one morning she turned up in the office having made a positive decision the day before, and found a stuffed monkey, you know, a little monkey on her desk. And she asked somebody, what's the meaning of this? And they said, oh, it's the grant monkey. And she didn't understand what they meant by the grant monkey to start with. When again she asked around, they said, oh yeah, you get that award if you give too many people the right to the right to have asylum. So she blew the whistle on that. I mean, it's very hard to find out not only what goes on inside those decision-making. I mean, we see the results of it in the results of the letters that women get when they're refused their asylum. So they will have rubber stamp paragraphs that have been lifted from somewhere else. It will maybe even have the wrong country. It may even refer to her as he. You know, there's just errors galore, and that is presented as, you know, a decision-making policy. So there's a lot that people have been able to challenge. But in the end, we don't know who is being employed in these offices. For all we know, you know, they're members of the EDL. You know, their political affiliations are so right-wing that that's what attracts them to the job, and that's why they get the job. You know, so there's so much that's hidden, you know, that contributes to the racism, to the sexism, to the outrightly outrageous decision-making that would, you know, shock most people when you see what somebody's been through.
So the current Home Office, she's a brown woman or black woman, right?
She's even admitted she's originally Ugandan Asian, and she's even admitted that under her own policies, her family would not have been given asylum in this country. But she doesn't care. That's not the issue.
Yeah, and
it's not the issue is keeping people out. It's like we have a lot of gatekeepers, black people in positions of power who've pulled up the drawbridge and who've gone with, you know, the current right-wing flow of how people of color should be treated. You know, if that's Kemi Badenoch announcing that there's no such thing as institutional racism. You know, we've got the what we call the sewage report by Tony Sewell saying, again, there's no institutional racism. They hire these people to absolutely undermine and frankly, tell us that black is white. You know, they have reached the point, I mean, Orwell was good on that. They've reached the point where, you know, there's no such thing as our truths, which is what we're living. There's only what they're spewing out through the television and through the legislation and through the policies and what they're telling people. And COVID has been a great cover for all of that, you know, in relation to being able to hide truths. So we are in very dangerous times. And I think a lot of people really do realize that. And that's one, well, not one, but it's you know, these are the reasons that movements like Kill the Bill movement, Black Lives Matter, the Gypsy Roma traveller communities coming together with other communities, because we recognize we're all under the same cosh, you know, and there is strength in us fighting all of our struggles, you know, together. I mean, the disability movement has been very good on that as well, you know, being very out there on the streets, you know, in defiance of the kind of repression and surveillance, you know, because they're up against the police reporting them to the Department of Work and Pensions and saying, how can they be on a demonstration if they're getting disability benefits? So it's clearer and clearer that it's in all of our interests to, you know, really work together on each other's struggles, because ultimately we're all going down the same route unless we do, from climate justice to everything else.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was just mentioning the fact that she was brown or black because a very simple tactic. I mean, if you're the elite and you know that the Home Office is the target of racist suspicions, and yeah, one way of dealing with that, you bring in a home secretary who is black or brown, and most people will think, oh, but this is impossible that this woman or man will implement racist policies. But they do. I mean, you can find a woman who will implement misogynistic policies, and you will find a brown or black person who will implement racist policies. It's just a fact. And yeah, this is also a tactic to get away with murder.
We were contacted by the mother of a 15-year-old who had reported rape and was on the verge of being prosecuted herself for a so-called false rape allegation. And her mother contacted us, and she was very distressed because obviously her daughter had been raped as a young woman, and she was about to be prosecuted herself.
As a child, maybe even, Nicola, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
You're a child in the UK at 15.
You are. Yeah. Absolutely.
Basically, she's a girl. Yeah,
who was very, very traumatized. And the main piece of evidence that they said they had that proved she was lying was that she had said that the man had ejaculated on her and that there would be semen on her t-shirt. So the force claims that they sent it away and they couldn't find this evidence. And on that basis, they decided she was lying, and they were about to prosecute her. And she came to us and she was very distressed, the mother. And we helped her make a complaint to the police, and therefore a different police force investigated the rape. They dealt with it separately. And when they tested the t-shirt, they found the evidence. And so she was obviously then no longer a suspect. They prosecuted the guy. He was found guilty. He was charged, and the jury found him guilty, and he was convicted. I think he got about 5 years. And she also won compensation. So that was a massive victory, because in this country, a lot of women are threatened with or are prosecuted for either a false rape allegation or, you know, lesser charge. So that was a massive victory. And we helped a woman with her compensation claim. She was raped when she was 21 by a taxi driver. She'd been out over Christmas. She herself was drunk, so knew she couldn't drive and had to get home safely. The guy raped her. It did go to court, but he was acquitted, and the judge ordered an investigation into the police investigation, because there were 5 different officers that did this investigation. They kept leaving for whatever reason, and the judge didn't even feel like a basic investigation had even been carried out. He couldn't understand how it got to court, and, you know, then obviously the guy was acquitted. So she'd applied to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, and they had ruled that she was raped. But in between being raped and applying for compensation, she had gone out for a drink with her friend, and she was taking her car because she was now too afraid to get into a taxi because of what had happened to her. She was randomly stopped on a routine thing, and they found that she was, I mean, literally just over the drink driving limit, literally just over. And she was prosecuted for that, and she got a conviction. And the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority said, okay, well, we believe that you were raped, and we'll give you the standard £11,000, but we're going to deduct it by 30% because you've got a criminal conviction for drinking while over the, for driving while over the limit. We helped her appeal, seek a decision, and they ended up changing it from 30% to 10%. So she did have 10% taken off, but we managed to get it dropped from 30% to 10%. And you know, that's a victory for women everywhere, because why should you have a compensation award denied because you've got a conviction either for, you know, not having a TV license, or, you know, a very, very minor conviction, sometimes from 20 odd years ago.
We've got a campaign going on that particular issue right now. So that's, you know, it's not a one-off. The one I wanted to tell you about, Mehdi, is this woman who we've been working with for some time. Her brother won £85,000 compensation after being sexually abused in one of the notorious children's homes in London, which is called Shirley Oaks. And we worked with them since they first got together as a survivors association, and it's the biggest independent self-run survivors association. It's not a charity or an NGO, and they basically, a lot of people were people of color. You know, they were kids put in this home from about the 60s until fairly recently it was closed down. And as you probably know, in this country there's been a massive scandal of child abuse and, you know, rape that's gone on in lots of different towns and cities across the country, but very much focused on taking kids who are in care, you know, as vulnerable because they don't have parents to protect them, and the authorities don't protect them. In fact, in some cases they facilitate it, also assisted by the police in some cases. So it was a great victory, you know, and it was another example of what you can achieve if you get together as survivors and go up against the state as a big group with force. I think they've broken all records of how much compensation they've won altogether in all the claims, where they've basically been suing the local authority that ran the home. That's how they got the money. And it was a hard fight, but they're winning a lot. So it's a great inspiration for us too.
I just add something, because I think that fight was very particular in the sense that it also managed to get some high profile people behind it, and people, you know, who were abused themselves, who had made it in society, who put their, you know, energies back into remembering what had happened to, you know, those that they grew up with, who, and had all been to different degrees, they'd all suffered, you know, at this school. Even those who might not have been raped suffered some horrendous punishments and stuff. And I think it's all, you know, it's part of a piece that has remained so hidden, and that's obvious when you look at what's coming out in Canada now with the native, you know, the First Nation people finding that, you know, their children that have been victims of a genocide, you know. And it's you know, it's definitely, it happened in Australia with the indigenous people. So it's definitely something where we're in a stronger position today than we were, say, when I was a kid growing up with sexual abuse by my stepfather and nobody to speak out to. It's moved to a powerful position for kids, although of course not every kid can still speak out. But it's a definite change in times, you know, and it's reflected in the Me Too and what we had, the slut walk, and the, you know, just those the powerful voices that rise up and speak, and that therefore speak out to kids who've remained silent about what they've been through for years.
In the next part,
he got labelled a rapist even though he was never even charged, by lots of media who were quite willing to trash him and also trash the women, frankly.